Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's start with the first topic: Epic v Google, and the unsealed documents that were just sort of given up last week. That the press has been able to go through and look at. You want to sort of give a high level overview of what's been going on in this court case, Eric?
The base idea here is that Epic really wanted to command 100% or near enough of its income from Fortnite, right? They don't want to spend 30% when you buy V-Bucks or whatever, just to the platform for facilitating that little transaction. They have their own distribution network and their own distribution store because they already do this on Windows. They used to do it on Mac to an extent. They still do. And like they had their own Android app that they could sideload and bypass all of this. So they started looking at it and saying, how do we get out of the app stores? This is one of the things that led to the Epic versus Apple lawsuit. But separately, they wanted to do the same thing with Google and get out from underneath Google in that space and just have their own Epic Games launcher effectively on Android. They had the technology, they had the app ready, and they were working on deals with device manufacturers like OnePlus. When Google got wind of this, they immediately had internal meetings and conversations, it sounds like, and it was determined that how much money was on the line here for Google, Justin, in terms of if they started to allow Epic to have their own app stores preloaded on devices, that other companies would also do it, and what was at stake here?
It wasn't just that; it was actually because the Epic's workaround was to sideload the app, which would circumvent the store entirely and just
Yep.
allow users to run the app, on Android, like as an Android APK. Um, the amount of money that was assumed at this point for the large publishers, so that includes like Activision for like Call of Duty, Warzone, and any number of these major games that have in-app purchases, is up to $6 billion in lost revenues if this sort of behavior caught on and a lot of the larger developers followed suit.
Right. So that's a big incentive for Google to come in and start making deals, and that's apparently what happened. They put the kibosh on the OnePlus deal, and they started making deals where I think there's like some percentage of sales, the cuts of sales through the Play Store, I think, would make their way back to the manufacturers. So there were like incentives for people to take the exclusivity deal to work only with the Play Store. And this is where Google's coming in, just throwing money at the problem and saying, hey, don't let anybody else compete in the space with us, even though ostensibly it's an open platform.
Yeah, I think there's more to say here, which is basically the crux of the entire suit, beyond it being an antitrust, is saying that Google manipulated the market. What the details weren't formally known, or the details that weren't formally known, was to what extent Google went to manipulate the market, because all this
Right.
was not public
Private.
knowledge prior to
Yeah.
this. So I'd
Yeah.
like to actually go over some of the more
The
aggressive
details.
tactics that Google took. Okay, so one of the first things, and this is actually a longer piece, was that uh, or one of the first pieces was they were paying the largest developers, like just outright saying, we will give you this amount of money to stay on the platform and not
Make your own.
leave and sideload your own app, in the same way that Amazon's game launcher had way back when, and the way that Epic had sort of followed through with when they got sick of dealing with Google's Play Store and their percentage cuts. And also, in effect, which we'll go into more detail later, is providing uh, uh, revenue percentage discounts, I guess is the best way to say it, to app developers. So opposed to just taking 30%, they had agreed to give 5% back to the publisher and saying, okay, we'll do it for 25%. And these are sort of backdoor deals that weren't really public knowledge, at least beyond rumors. So that was one way. Eric, do you have any others?
They're also looking at kind of what I was saying before, deals that were being done in the past and making sure that those deals didn't make it into fruition. according to the court documents, every device manufacturer, with the exception of Samsung, signed up for that. So
part of it was that they like put it under their guise of like a top tier hardware manufacturer program, of which every
yeah,
major uh, phone manufacturer was part of. In this forced developers to not to be exclusive to Google Play Store apps, so it wouldn't allow them to pre-install things like Epic's, Epic launcher or the Fortnite launcher on the phones pre-installed, which is a valid strategy for people like Epic who
yeah,
would otherwise ask people to sideload, which is not the most easy process. It's like a multi 5-10 step process. Having it pre-installed on phones would escape all that, and then people would have the option to play Fortnite outright. And if you recall, this is along the lines of what got Microsoft in trouble in the 90s with its antitrust suit.
yep.
So
And
it's the whole pre-installed apps and having control over that entire thing.
yeah,
This is now sort of what Google's emulating here.
right. I mean, this isn't unprecedented. Having pre-installed apps and making deals for that to happen is standard industry practice. Facebook made deals with manufacturers, phone manufacturers and distributors, a decade ago or more, to make sure that the Facebook app was pre-installed on a lot of devices. That type of app bundle is frequently sold to customers as being a benefit. It's, yeah,
But this document goes on to detail even more, I'd say, cutthroat actions that Google took to sort of stymie Epic's strategy in making Fortnite available for Android users. So the next thing that they do is they worked directly with a minority shareholder in Epic, Tencent, to put
oh yeah,
pressure on Epic to play to Google's rules. So behind Epic's back, they went directly to Tencent and offered them a deal. Well, offer them two options, which was basically put more money into Epic and get a larger stake in the company. And at the time this was happening, it was a 10% stake that Tencent had. Now it's a 40% stake. To put pressure and get them to comply with what Google wants, or they threw around the idea of doing a complete buyout with Tencent. So Google and Tencent would have gone in and attempted to do an outright buyout of Epic to squash this whole thing.
shady
So do you get to
practice.
understand the last action they took that is really really insidious?
I'm blanking on what it would be right now. If you want
So
to cover it.
they basically try to bait and switch. So as we said earlier, they were offering revenue cuts or revenue share cuts to some developers, like Activision. They were offering like a 25% stake, and Activision was going to be able to get 5% more of the revenues that were, or get to keep 5% more of the revenues that they were generating. And Epic was aware of this, so they approached Google asking for the same deal. But because it wasn't public knowledge at the time, they used the specific communication there to frame Epic as trying to pressure Google into coercing them into providing a lower revenue share through coercion. Otherwise, it'd take the game away from their platform, and they use that as to like frame Epic as more coercive than they actually were, when in fact Google was actually striking these deals with other publishers, and they sort of just they tried to they tried an entrapment type maneuver on them, which later came out in these documents. By the end of all this information, this revealed information, uh, uh, Google isn't looking like the sweetest company that they sometimes appear to be.
Yeah, these
Um,
are pretty cutthroat business tactics.
yeah, very much so. And to be fair, this is the Google Play operations. It's like wholly contained within their group. I would assume that Alphabet and other parts of the company are really unaware of these sort of tactics, but
Alphabet is, because the report about the $6 billion issue was reported to the Alphabet.
Because the Play Store, I
parent
think, is
company.
under Alphabet as well, whereas
Yes.
the Android OS, I think the search engine is on their own silo.
Yeah, it's separated because it's its own massive generator, or ads, one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Is Google's actions reasonable here?
So there's two angles to look at this from, which is, from Google's standpoint, when they're looking at it and saying, Android is a platform and we have market share right now, like we are the de facto standard, and we want to pay other people money to make sure that remains the same. Google has a similar practice that they handle in another kind of technology sector, which is web browsers. Google pays billions of dollars to Apple and to Mozilla, probably I don't think they can pay Microsoft because Microsoft has its own thing, but Apple and Mozilla, at least for Firefox and Safari, to be the default search engine on the platforms, on those browsers. It's a yearly fee, I believe. They have to renegotiate every year. And I think I saw a headline earlier today that said Google was paying Apple something like $15 billion to remain the default just for Safari. If we accept the business practice of paying billions of dollars to remain the default, this may be a Google argument, is it's the same thing. It's the default store that's installed with devices, right? It's kind of a similarity thing. The problem is that if it was the default store, then that's the one that links for going to an app store would get you to. But they're becoming exclusive, and it's that exclusivity that's the problem here, I think. And to me, that's where this kind of goes over that edge. This is just personally looking at it and saying, there's something about here that just feels wrong. That's my read on it. Do you have a different take?
From the business side, this isn't that strange,
right?
As a business that is part of a larger publicly traded business, they are not expected to lose massive sets of revenue. And had dominoes fallen, there would have been a $6 billion revenue loss in 1 year that they'd have to try to explain to investors. And so them being cutthroat about preventing this from happening is not at all surprising.
Right.
I think what is surprising is how cutthroat they had gotten. It goes beyond the standard, we are making business deals to try to maintain competitiveness or whatever else, lose revenue. But this is we're going to undercut you and prevent a deal from happening by using coercion. And so right. I think that's pretty surprising. I think them going to Tencent behind Epic's back and trying to probably coerce a shareholder, Tencent, which would have games on the Google Play Store, to put extra pressure on Epic, all seems very much shady.
Anti-competitive, you could say.
I would go as far as saying that there are things in here that could certainly put them in the crosshairs of an antitrust lawsuit. And I don't think, besides having like really pro-business judges, would normally probably not hold water, especially like in a European court. I think I kind of answered my second question, which was going to be like, does this open up Google to antitrust liabilities? I mean, do you have any further thoughts on that, Eric?
Yeah, nothing to really add beyond the answer of, I think this does open them up a bit. The breadth of effort that they went into to effectively just squash the possibility of competition. That's the problem here to me. It's not that they outcompeted. They didn't allow even the space for competition. With the Apple case, it's a little bit different because they developed this whole ecosystem and they've locked things down from the start. Whereas Google said, yeah, here you go. Here's everything. We've been telling you it's open. This is, we in fact, as you said, it's part of their company marketing and their branding is that they're more open than, say, Apple, who's all locked down and private. Until you find out that behind the scenes they're being shady and like doing even more shady things than Apple is, where Apple's just like, no, it's our platform, it's our rules. Whereas Google is just kind of going behind the scenes and with business practices that are questionable at best.
Right.
And that's where the major, to my mind, this starts to really feel different, and definitely I think opens them up to the anti-competitive part, because it's a specific action that they took to squash competition where it otherwise would have been had they done nothing.
Both Apple and Google, in this case, taking a 30% cut of a piece of software and any money it generates. How does this affect game developers, especially indie game developers that are trying to cut their teeth and sort of make a name for themselves on these platforms?
Well, I mean, I think it stops certain parts of or certain opportunities that would otherwise arise, right? Especially on the indie side. There are websites like itch.io where anyone can upload a game and anyone can download it. It's up to you to see if you can make money from it, but it's there. There are umpteen different stores, good old games, GOG or whatever. There's the Humble store and Humble Bundle. Tons of this stuff. And there's lots of different opportunities in competition for how much money you as a developer can make on your game on that platform. If this was allowed to open up, presumably, Epic might try to push more games onto its launcher and its store on devices, and you'd suddenly have competition between Google, and have Google off theoretically lowering a percentage to at least match what Epic offers, if not go undercut them some way, and make these deals to make it happen. So game developers in mass are losing out on this, and more of the money is just shuffling into the hands of the platform holders. The 30% cut, I remember reading an article back when the first App Store was announced, and Apple said 30% cut, and my first reaction was, that seems kind of high. But then another software developer at the time, I think it was on a Mac software developer, said, no, you don't understand that how much money that 30%, like the amount of money we have to put into building a website, building, paying for hosting service and bandwidth costs, and all of the storefront details and the development time that goes into managing all of that. I'll gladly give up 30% if I only have to worry about development and then pushing a ship button. Times have changed though. Like the costs behind that model of running a network theoretically would have gone down by now in the 10 plus years that it's been around. Except the prices remain the same. And that's where some of this question of, well, where's competition to come in our current economic model to lower that price as we expect it should be, and it's not. So that's kind of, to me, part of this problem for indie developers who are, now there's a lot more indie developers. It's really easy to make game, and yet we still have to pay that same exact fee.